I don't want to be cheesy, but I kind of came up with these 4 things that really helped me heal, and they matter a lot. The first thing was acceptance, right? Accepting what happened to you, because for the longest time I was like, I don't I don't care about you. I didn't need you. I didn't need your love. I'm strong enough to do without it. So I wouldn't accept it. I just buried it. And when I did that, it would come back up in my marriage. It would come back
Mm,
up when I was pressed, when I was stressed out or overworked. Those things came back out. So you can't just avoid the wounds of your father. Like, you do have to accept, I did need you when I was a child. You did have power over me, and you didn't do what you were supposed to do. And I was left with the wound. And just say it and be real about it. Don't say I didn't need you and I've moved on, because then
mm,
you can't heal. I've said this before. A wound unacknowledged is a wound unhealed. Um, so there's acceptance, and then there's grief. Like, you need to grieve over it. So I grieved what happened to us, what happened to my mom, the relationship with my dad that I should have had, especially now that I have a good relationship with my kids. I had to grieve that I actually never had that. Um, I grieve the trauma my kids have had from the baggage that I've carried into fatherhood. Like, you had to have a moment to grieve the loss of what could have been and of what happened. And it's really important, though, that you don't get stuck there, because that's where you get to be a victim. You
mhm.
get stuck in grief, you never move on. So it's a good tool, but you need to move on from it once you've had your grief. And you may have more than one moment in your life, but don't get stuck there. So after you kind of grieve, then you're like, so what now? I've accepted it, I've grieved it. For me, it was analyzing, like, how has this affected my life, and how do I need to work on it? How do I heal it? Um, for me, there was this thing of, there were certain attributes of myself, personality traits, that were defense mechanisms when I was in that survival mode, that have sabotaged my life as an adult. Um, like being a workaholic and trying to gain love through accomplishment, because my dad gave me accomplishment when I achieved things. Um, Sorry, he gave me love and affirmations or when I achieved things. And that has sabotaged some things later in my life.
Mhm.
So, like, working on myself, like, how has that hurt me? How's it manifesting in my life now? How do I address all of those things and start to do the emotional work, the spiritual work, create disciplines around healing those things? So, getting off your butt in grief, you're putting yourself to work to heal. And once you come to a place, this is the step 4 is forgiveness, where you have healed as a person. I do think it's really important, like for me, to step back and look at my dad and say, you know what, though? He was also a man who was like me, who came to fatherhood, who also had a father who was just as hard on him, if not worse, who came from a line of men who were that way. He didn't know what he was doing, and he was groping through the dark. And yeah, he made decisions that he shouldn't have made, but it enabled me when I failed and became less a man than I wanted to be, to have some empathy and compassion for him. And I was eventually able to stand on firm enough ground to forgive the man who had caused me pain in the first place. So getting to forgiveness of the people who victimized you in the first place, I feel like, is the final step. There's no final, it's a process. You always go through it. So forgiving them, and forgiving them doesn't necessarily mean, it's all rainbows and hugs. The relationship may still not be able to come back. They still may be a really toxic, abusive person, and not willing to change. So it may not redeem the relationship. Forgiveness is not for them. Forgiveness is for you, so
Mhm.
that you can move on. But sometimes it does bring reconciliation to the relationship that wasn't there before. And sometimes that you won't believe what it redeems. So that was kind of my process from going from victim to overcoming it. And I wouldn't call myself a victor. I experienced victories continuously throughout
Yeah.
the process of living a life.
All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.